For anyone who grew up in the 80s and 90s, Skeletor is unforgettable. That skull-faced sorcerer standing before Castle Grayskull, staff raised, swearing to destroy He-Man or die trying. The eternal enemy, the living embodiment of evil, and for years, that's all we knew. But buried in the original Masters of the Universe mini-comics, the ones packed inside the action figure boxes, there was a much darker version. One that doesn't begin in Snake Mountain. Not with a skull, not with evil, but with a prince rejected by his own family. And a secret that Mattel deliberately kept off your television screen for almost 20 years. To understand the tragedy of Skeletor, we have to talk about Keldor. In multiple versions of the He-Man universe, Keldor is the older half-brother of King Randor, which makes him the direct uncle of Prince Adam, of He-Man himself. His father was King Miro, legitimate royalty. But his mother? She was Gar, a blue-skinned race considered outsiders in Eternian society, looked down on, never fully accepted by the ruling class. And here's the detail that changes everything. Keldor was illegitimate, which in the royal law of Eternia meant exactly one thing: zero claim to the throne. Think about that for a second. This man was born into the royal family, raised in the palace, trained alongside royalty, and still told he didn't belong. That the accident of his birth made him lesser. That kind of rejection doesn't just make you angry. It hollows you out. While his half-brother Randor was being groomed for the crown, Keldor turned to the one place that didn't judge his bloodline: dark magic. He became a master swordsman, a scholar of forbidden arcane arts, a man searching in sorcery for the power and the validation that his own family refused to give him. And then came the battle that destroyed everything. In a desperate fight for control of Eternia, Keldor faces his own half-brother Randor. In the chaos, Keldor hurls a vial of corrosive liquid at Randor, but it deflects, straight back at him. The man who spent his whole life being told he wasn't enough, wasn't royal enough, wasn't pure enough, lost the one thing he had left: his own face. Dying, disfigured, abandoned even by his own ambition. Keldor makes a deal. He reaches out to the one force willing to answer, a being of immense ancient power. Hordak answers. And trust me, Hordak's price for that favor? That's a story dark enough to deserve its own video. In that moment, Keldor the man dies. And from the ashes, Skeletor is born. Not a demon from another dimension, not a random conqueror, a prince, a brother, an uncle, a wound that never healed. Now, here's where this story gets truly fascinating. And honestly, a little unsettling. This origin existed as early as 1986. Mattel had already created Keldor. The story was written. The mini-comics packed with the action figures hinted at it. But it never once appeared on your television. Why? Lou Scheimer, the legendary producer at Filmation, the studio behind the original He-Man cartoon, later revealed in interviews that they faced constant pressure from advocacy groups like Action for Children's Television. These groups were pushing hard against anything they considered too dark for kids. And the Keldor story had everything they were fighting against: family betrayal, deep social division, a man bargaining with a dark, ancient power. For Saturday morning cartoons in 1987, that was considered too much. Then, the toy line hit a sales crisis. The animated series ended, and the Keldor story was quietly buried, locked away for 16 years. 16 years of kids watching Skeletor as just a skull-faced bad guy with no real backstory, when the real story was sitting in a drawer at Mattel the whole time. It wasn't until 2002, when Mattel needed to win back adult fans for the relaunch, that they finally pulled Keldor out of the vault. and made his family tragedy the emotional core of the new series. So I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Does that make Skeletor more frightening or less? A monster born from injustice is a lot scarier than a monster born from nothing. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Keldor was born a prince. He was rejected like a commoner. He died reaching for the throne and came back as something that no longer needed one. The skull on his face isn't a mask. It's what's left when everything human has been stripped away by a family that looked at their own blood and said, "Not good enough." Now you know the rest of the story. If you want to know what Hordak actually demanded in exchange for saving Keldor's life, and why that deal created ripples that reached all the way to She-Ra's Etheria, that story is coming very soon. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you in the next secret.